So in here we've got a new watch from Casio, and it's a watch that's basically being rammed down my throat every single time I log into Amazon. It seems to be one of the best-selling watches in recent weeks, so I figured I'd buy one, take a quick look at it, try and find out why everyone's buying this one in particular, and generally see if it's any good. Now this is actually a watch I have tried before in a slightly different guise. This is the MTP-1302, but this new one is the PE version, which has something a little bit fancy going on. Comes in pretty standard Casio packaging. I'll leave a link to this watch in the video description. This one was on Amazon, but it came through Rubicon Watches from the looks of this. So yeah, fairly basic packaging, but it's not ugly like a few years ago at least. Now this one is kind of what's nicknamed the Casio Datejust, because it's got a fair amount visually in common with the old Rolex Datejust. Now, as you might imagine, for a Casio watch, this isn't nearly as expensive as a Rolex. This one cost me, I think, just shy of £61. So it's not super cheap, but as far as watches in general go, it is towards the more affordable end of things for sure. And here is a quick look at it, and I have to say the dial on this looks phenomenal. Much better than I was expecting. It's not quite as much of a Tiffany style blue as what it appears online. I already reviewed a Tiffany version of this watch, which was quite disappointing, but this one looks much better. It's more of like a silver blue, almost like a blue steel or something. And of course we've got some texture this time around too, so you'll see here it's got like an inverted waffle effect essentially. So rather than those squares protruding out from the dial, they're actually indented into the dial, and yeah, it looks pretty good, I must say. Definitely the best looking version of this watch I've seen for sure, or at least the most premium. Casio have released a bunch of new colours of this watch over the past few months, but this one was definitely the most unique that I've seen since the first one launched, so I figured it was worth covering. Now, while it looks really flashy and quite impressive at a distance, I have to say, it's still actually not the best value watch for about 60 quid, and that's for a few reasons. It's got reasonable water resistance there, 50 meters, got a mineral crystal, which is okay for the money, kind of normal really. Gives you some scratch resistance, not as good as some sapphire options you might be able to find on AliExpress, but good thing with this mineral is it does keep the dial pretty clear, as you can see. But the big drawback is the case material, sadly. So it is shiny metal, as you can see, and you might assume this is stainless steel, but unfortunately not. If you've seen my coverage of the original version of this watch, you'll know this is actually like a chromed brass, basically. And you can tell just by the fact that it's so shiny, and also it has more of a blue hue to it, as you can see here, compared to the actual stainless steel used on the bracelet, which has a bit more of a yellowy tone in comparison. And the drawbacks with this are just that it will certainly not wear as well, and it also just doesn't look and feel quite as good either. Due to that chrome effect surface, it kind of looks like plastic, or in a lot of ways like different bathroom fittings, sadly. The back, I believe, is stainless steel, and this one is a snapback from the looks of this. Under the hood is a quartz movement, as you probably expect from Casio. I can't remember the exact movement inside here, but because it says Japan movement here, it's possibly something from Seiko or Citizen, believe it or not. That's what's most commonly been found in the back of Casio watches as of late. Yeah, most Casio watches don't actually contain Casio movements anymore. As for the bracelet, well, it's kind of standard fare for cheap Casios. This isn't a disaster. It's not as bad as the likes of their digital watches, you know, the really cheap ones, but it is still using folded links. One upside is you do get a fair amount of micro adjustments here, which is good. That's something that's inexplicably missing from some more expensive options. And the clasp is pretty basic, but you know, you'll probably find a comfortable fit at least. But you may get one or two pulled hairs just because of the kind of half hollow effect here. There are some gaps for arm hairs to kind of slip down, but it's not too bad all in all. But this watch certainly isn't built as well as some AliExpress alternatives, shall we say. Also, the lume in general on Casio watches is pretty poor, this one included, but I'll just give you a quick close-up first of all so you can take a look. As with many Casio watches, this one's pretty well aligned, as you can see there. The second hand hits most of those markers. And from what some of you guys have told me over the years, that's because Casio basically has a special super expensive machine that does the hand alignment for them, whereas most brands rely on that still being a manual job essentially, and a pretty hard one at that apparently. Most of the rest of the markers on this one still pretty flat, but I have to say, for whatever reason, they look better. I don't know if this is an element that Casio has maybe improved. They certainly look like they're standing out more than in previous iterations of this watch. I'll see if I can pull up any footage of the old one, because I'm sure that these were flusher to the dial and more rounded off, especially the single markers there. Whereas these certainly seem slightly more squared off, so perhaps there's been a very minor upgrade there, but I wouldn't expect much of an upgrade in the loom department, sadly. We'll get to that at the end. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the sizing on sites like Amazon is certainly not to be believed. For whatever reason, the case diameter online is currently listed on Amazon UK at 44.2 millimeters. Now, I mean, if you've watched any of my videos before and you know I've got pretty small hands, you'll be able to tell this is certainly not a 44mm watch. This is actually a 38.5mm watch, pretty much. So it's actually quite palatable. And it says on here that 38.5 is the bandwidth, which definitely isn't the case. The lug width on this one is actually about 20mm, so not too bad. Should give you some reasonable options if you did want to change that kind of middle-of-the-road bracelet. Also crown there is push-pull. Feels pretty good, as with most Casio watches. You can definitely see why this watch has sold so well. It certainly here looks very, very flashy for the money, and it isn't a carbon copy of a Datejust, despite the very similar bezel there. There certainly are some clear differences. Lug to lug, by the way, 44.4, so that must be what they actually meant with the diameter. And it's always been quite a thin watch, this. 9.4, so not bad. Looks thinner than 9.4, I'd say, though, as you can see there. Now, I won't fully size this one, but fits fairly well, actually, in my 6 1/4 inch wrist. I don't remember this watch fitting quite so well. But yeah, I've got a pretty small arm, really, definitely far below average. So I think for most people, this would be a really snug fit. In fact, if you've got a large wrist, this one might look a bit small, I have to say. But if you're kind of an average male wrist, you should be absolutely fine here. Yeah, overall, I definitely get the impression this is the best of these Casio Datejusts. But at the sort of price it's currently at, it is also more expensive than you've been able to get some of the others at previously. Yeah, approximately £60 on Amazon in the UK. Not sure what it is in the US. It's not the best deal, because previous versions, I've seen them go as low as about 35 before now. So you're certainly paying a premium at the moment. Maybe that one will go down over time, because it is a new model. And often, as these Casio models get older and more hit the grey market, they do tend to get quite significantly cheaper, a bit like Seiko's used to. Let's give this a quick low light test just to show you what we're working with. You'll see when I turn on my torch here that this luminescence is pretty weak, and it certainly doesn't last particularly well. Now, I'm not sure whether it's the colour of this particular one, or if Casio have made some very minor modifications, a bit like with the markers perhaps. But it seems maybe a fraction better than previous versions of this watch. I mean, it's still pretty poor though. After under a minute, it's almost gone. So there you go, there's your quick first look at Casio's current bestseller on sites like Amazon. Do you think it's kind of worth the trade-off for that brass case? I mean, personally, I'm not too convinced, but I do think the dial looks very pretty, I must say. Definitely helps the watch look more expensive, at least. I think that's clearly what a lot of people are after. It's linked down below if you do want to take a look at it.